Alex? Good day, everybody. My name is Liam DeSanto. I'm with Summit Partners. I am host today for our Recon presentation that's going to be brought to you by Alex in regards to some managed security solutions that I think you'll find very valuable. Just real quick, a little bit about Summit Partners before I turn it over to Alex. Summit Partners is what we refer to as a boutique partner. We're headquartered in Las Vegas with offices in Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, and Denver, as well as Boston. We focus on building strong relationships with our customers so that way we can understand what your technology needs and problems are so we can help you solve those problems, as opposed to just trying to take any technology and shove it down your throat, right? We want to make sure that the solutions we're providing are going to truly make IT life easier so that way you can sleep better at night and you can actually go to bed at night as opposed to staying up all hours of the night working on technologies. And we think the Recon managed security solutions fall into the category, especially with so many security threats becoming more and more prevalent as every day. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, we had the WannaCry outbreak that primarily hit Europe, but it's just a matter of time before we have something like that come through the United States again. So with those things in mind and things like the Target hack that occurred a couple of years ago where they came into the HVAC system, I think you'll find the information we're providing today very valuable. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alex so he can get information over to you. Thanks for joining.
Well, Tim, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you guys today. My name is Alex Ryals, so I am manage the security and networking business for Tech Data. Tech Data is a global IT distribution company, and we provide IT solutions to our many trusted partners, like Summit Partners, as well as other solutions like the one we're going to talk about today, Recon. So I'm very excited to be here. Security is one of my favorite topics, because it is changing every single day. I use an app on my phone called Flipboard, and every day when I look at my Flipboard articles related to cybersecurity, there is a new attack vector, or something interesting happen in the cybersecurity space that keeps me on my toes, and that's why I love this space. You know, I think you guys would all agree that you have also noticed in the media a lot of activity going on recently around cybersecurity. I think it's more important than ever before for all of us as consumers of IT equipment and protecting our businesses to be very vigilant and think very closely about how we want to structure our security posture to make sure we're best equipped to meet the threat. You know, just yesterday I was looking at my Flipboard app, and before I went to bed last night, and I saw an article about a new type of attack that happened in December. You may have read about the power outage over in Kiev in the Ukraine. That only lasted a few hours. It was a power outage to the utility grid over there. But what was interesting is very recently, like the last week, we discovered that from the attack, the hackers have built a platform, a framework, if you will, a set of tools that can be used now to compromise other power grids in Asia and in Europe. And what's interesting and what we need to take note of through that activity is not that there was one isolated attack in December in Kiev, but more importantly that I have seen recently in the dark web and with a lot of our customer base that the guys are creating these automated platforms in record numbers here lately, faster than I've seen before. In this example, this platform happens to go after the energy sector specifically, leveraging vulnerabilities in industrial controls, SCADA attacks, if you will. I was actually this past week in Moscow at a Kaspersky event, a global partner event, and we saw some pretty incredible demonstrations of SCADA industrial control attacks that they are tracking over there, and Kaspersky has some solutions for that. But the platform and framework technology being built today to automate attack vectors is staggering. And so the question is, what do we do as consumers, as customers, to fight against this? Like, how do you prepare for hackers coming after you with automated tools that can compromise us? I was talking today with a hospital over in California, and they had been attacked through some ransomware, and it was an automated attack through a platform that compromised one of their Windows systems and got into their network, and they compromised over 250 of their 500 servers in this hospital, and locked up the critical servers, Active Directory servers, and the servers that host the medical data, so that doctors could no longer access patient information. And this hospital was paralyzed. They had to move patients to other places. You know, this is a similar attack to what we saw with WannaCry a few weeks ago, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the amount, the scale of these attacks happening, like at this hospital, they're resulting in ransomware attacks and real devastation of data, is something that literally we can't ignore today. So what I want to talk to you about in this short period of time that we have, a set of solutions that we have offered to help you monitor your security posture. And the reason it's so important that we look at solutions like Recon as a security managed service is because of an interesting question somebody asked me the other day. And I want to pose this question to you guys and talk about it for just a minute. So the question is, we've seen a lot of attacks here recently from the news, but if everyone in the world had access to the cyber weaponry of a first world nation state, what would the world look like if that would happen? For instance, a first world nation state is the U.S., it's China, it's Russia. These are countries that have dedicated groups that build cyber tools and weapons that are used on a daily basis. And a lot of times we don't even read about and see a lot of the results of the activities that happen between these countries. But what if those tools were wild? Interesting question. What would we do as consumers who are trying to protect our companies if the average hacker who wasn't even very good at programming could use tools written by someone who is an expert? And the truth is that's exactly what happened this year. And I bring this up because I feel like it's very important that we all understand where we are in the cyber warfare space today. Because it's hard to know how to defend yourself if you don't know the attack vector coming at you. So I wanted to talk quickly about two specific major activities that happened in the last 6 months that I think you should be aware of. One is called Vault 7. So we believe it was a CIA insider, but they leaked some of the CIA's offensive cyber weaponry to WikiLeaks. This happened in the last several months, and WikiLeaks was, I'll say, marginally responsible enough to not release the tools themselves right away. Instead, they posted documentation about the CIA's tool set up on WikiLeaks, and you can go there today. Just go to WikiLeaks, and you can read about a lot of the cyber weaponry that's available there. There's some pretty incredible tools there, and I won't talk about the details of those tools in this webinar, but feel free to go to WikiLeaks and read about them. I'll tell you that there are many, many different attacks that have happened over the last decade that previously we didn't know who the source was, and now we know that to be the CIA. This is devastating not only for the U.S. as a country that had information out in the wild, but WikiLeaks has notified Microsoft and Cisco and all the various vendors who apparently have vulnerabilities or backdoors in their systems that these tools used. WikiLeaks notified those vendors so they can repair and patch their systems, but there's a time limit on how long they're giving the vendors, and the tools are already starting to be released about WikiLeaks. As these tools are released, any nation in the world now has access to these first world nation state cyber weaponry to be used by anybody who wants to use them, and that's a really scary proposition. A second activity that happened was about 7 months ago, the NSA also lost their tools. The National Security Agency, they have a division of their organization called the Equation Group. That's basically the Offensive Cyber Division, NSA. The Equation Group was apparently hacked by a third-party hacking team known as the Shadow Brokers. The Shadow Brokers came across the NSA's toolbox of their cyber tools. Not the most current stuff. It was a few years old, but still there's a significant amount of source code there. Basically, the Shadow Brokers tried to post the tools online and sell them at auction for several hundred millions of dollars to countries they hoped would purchase, and they didn't get a buyer. No one believed that the NSA actually could lose their toys. So the Shadow Brokers, over the last 6 months, they have lowered their price. They've gone and directly negotiated with various countries, hoping to find a buyer, and nothing seemed to work. So unfortunately for the world, about a month ago, the Shadow Brokers released their half of the NSA toys onto GitHub, available for anyone in the world to access. And the link is here in the presentation, and you can literally go search for NSA Cyber Tools GitHub, and you'll find the tools out there freely to download. The idea is the Shadow Brokers changed their business model, right? They released half the toys in order to prove they had them, and the other half they're now offering under a subscription service for those willing to pay. Some of the good stuff is obviously under this subscription service, but there's a ton of information freely available now on GitHub. Now, the world saw the results of this activity just a few weeks ago with WannaCry. WannaCry was really just exploiting a Windows vulnerability, but they had written a tool that exploited that Windows vulnerability, that 0-day, in an automated way, making it very, very simple to leverage the vulnerability to compromise a Windows box. The WannaCry attack was just that. These hackers, unknown origin, they used the NSA tool to compromise a bunch of Windows systems, and they attacked the national health system over in Europe, specifically going after hospitals, and the objective was to plant ransomware into the hospital group, forcing those hospitals to pay a ransom to get their data back, to unlock their servers that had their patient records on them. The hospitals ended up having to evacuate patients. They couldn't perform surgeries because they didn't know whether to operate on the left side or the right side. They couldn't subscribe medication to patients because they couldn't look up the patient record to see what they were allergic to and what medication they were supposed to give. It was a real disaster. Fortunately, that attack spread globally, and I don't believe that the perpetrators of the attack really understood what they were releasing into the wild, because they DDoS themselves, distributed denial of service. It turns out that they did not anticipate and have the IT technical systems in place to accept the massive numbers of people around the globe who tried to pay the ransom to get a decryption key to get their data back. In fact, the number of requests coming into the bad guys' servers was so great that it overwhelmed their server technology, and nobody, to my knowledge to date, has received a decryption key when they paid their ransom. So the result of WannaCry was pretty devastating across the globe. Unfortunately, the bad guys doesn't play in their favor, because the more ransomware that's released in the wild that encrypts people's servers, if the bad guys don't give a key whenever someone pays the ransom, then people won't pay in the future, right? So it's in the bad guys' best interest to have a solid business model where they give you the key when you pay, and WannaCry was an example of a disaster for the bad guys when it comes to that. But also was a disaster for all the end users who were caught up in that tragic event. So ironically, a lot of people don't realize that WannaCry happened on a Friday. On a Monday, there was an even greater attack that happened that didn't hit the news because it wasn't ransomware. Using another set of the NSA tools that were leaked to the public, another group launched a botnet building exercise where they leveraged some other vulnerabilities in Windows to create a massive botnet army across the globe. That botnet army is not been activated yet, so we don't know what the ultimate outcome is going to be from that attack. It didn't hit the news because there's currently no way to trace what computers or devices have been infected with this new variant of malware, and we don't know what the objective is going to be. These botnet armies could be resurrected to attack servers with a DDoS attack or any number of other terrible things. So we'll find out eventually what happened or what will happen as a result of the attack that happened the following Monday. Here's my point. It's to know that these tools are now out in the wild. And a lot of companies are working very hard to try to build solutions that prevent access from a lot of these tools from gaining access to people's networks. But the number one thing we can all do as consumers and as customers with businesses and IT systems is patch early and often. You need to patch, number one, because vendors are going to release patches to try to shore up some of the loopholes and backdoors in some of these CIA and NSA tools. Vendors are going to patch because when you're infected with malware, it comes in through a vulnerability, and the vendors are trying to constantly patch, and so it's important you have a solid, robust patching solution. Second, it's tremendously important to have good backup and recovery systems, because only 25% of the time that you have ransomware are you going to get a decryption key and actually be able to get your data back. In the times that you do get a key, 10% of your devices are unrecoverable, because there's always an issue with the encryption process of at least 10% of your servers. I gave an example of a hospital group earlier in the year who were encrypted with over in California, and my buddy who works over there who's telling me about this, they did eventually get the decryption key because they paid the ransom, but about 10% of their servers were unrecoverable. In one case, one of the administrators seeing the encryption happening on one of his servers tried to yank the power, and that left the server in a weird state. The point is, the only recovery option for them for 10% of their systems was a backup recovery plan, and unfortunately they hadn't tested it in about 18 months, and the recovery didn't work on over half their servers. They had to try to recover. So terrible, terrible scenario for this hospital group. What I would tell you is it's more imperative than ever before that you have a robust backup and recovery solution that you test on a regular basis, because that may be the only way you'll get your data back if you're compromised with a piece of malware such as ransomware. So there's some interesting statistics out there, and we won't talk about every one of these, but I do want to touch on a couple of really important points. Number one, the fourth line down talks about the average time an attacker stays on your network before you ever find him is 140 days. Now, I've heard numbers up to 200, and I've heard numbers as low as 100, but let's take 140 as an average. That's a long time for a bad guy to be on your network, trolling around, understanding your servers, what's the Active Directory server, where are your database servers, what encryption do you use, who are the important executives in the company. That's a long time on average for a bad guy to be there. In the hospital case that I gave earlier, it turns out through forensics after the fact, they found out the bad guy had been there about 80 days before he launched his ransomware attack. So he knew exactly which 250 out of the 500 servers to go after. One thing we're going to talk about today with Recon as a security managed service is how we cut that number down. How do we find the bad guy the very first week or few days he's in the network by looking at attributes of the network and the infrastructure that show signs of a bad guy being there? And then how do we notify you to be able to remediate and fix that issue very quickly? That's what Recon's all about, and then we'll be talking more about that in just a few minutes. And I'll point out on this slide is we talk about the average cost of a lost or stolen data record. As high as $200 in a normal customer, double that for a healthcare customer. An interesting thing that I've noticed lately on the dark web is the cost of healthcare data records has gone down, as well as normal data records too for people. Turns out that your identity is becoming a commodity. Now, you can still make money on buying and selling identities on the dark web, but it's certainly becoming a commodity. If you think about it, our identities, all of us, have been bought and sold so many times on the dark web that it's just less interesting at this point. We've noticed that if you look at breaches like Yahoo, over 1 billion records stolen, user data records stolen over the last 2 breaches they had. That's a lot of user records. Your data is out there. Now, that doesn't mean that someone's targeting you specifically as a person, because 1 billion records is an awful lot. They're not focusing on all of them individually, of course. But your data has been bought and sold a whole lot of times. So that's the reason we've noticed in the last probably 6 to 12 months, ransomware has really stepped up the game, because in a ransomware scenario, a bad guy can take your data that theoretically only you care about, and they can offer that back to you for price if they hold it and you can't access it anymore. They log into your systems, they encrypt your data, and they dangle that key and say, pay me this amount or we will we'll destroy your data. Lately, new variants of ransomware are coming out on a daily basis that are getting more and more scary. Now there's a timetable to it. Modern ransomware variants here lately will pop up a clock and say that if you pay in the next 6 hours, the price will be X. And if you pay after 6 hours, the price goes up, and it'll be Y. And then every couple hours after that you don't pay, the price continues to climb until they know you're not going to pay, and so they just never send you your key, and your data is lost forever. So some of this information is, some of these ransomware variants are getting very, very scary. So expect ransomware to continue this year. Expect that these CIA and NSA tools that have been released to the public will be used to plant ransomware throughout this year and ongoing. This is a monumental challenge that we're all going to have to face. So as I talk to customers around the country on what do we do to challenge, I'm identifying a couple of interesting traits about customers that I think are really interesting. So first of all, I'll talk to some customers that they have very few security tools, or they're leveraging freeware tools, thinking that is going to cover them and their security posture. And I'll admit that there's some really good freeware tools like Snort and others on the market that you can download and leverage to build part of your security posture. So I want to knock a lot of the freeware tools that are out there. However, the challenge with freeware tools is they often require a tremendous amount of development capability to customize and integrate them into your infrastructure. They also generally are very difficult to put together into a centralized perspective of your security posture. If you're using open source or freeware firewalls and identity access management solutions and other security products, there are very few products that pull together all the security solutions for one perspective, a way to see your security posture across the enterprise. So while they can play a part in a security solution, I think customers who focus too much on just the free stuff leave themselves very vulnerable to, we generally, most of the customers I talk to don't have enough people to really deploy and implement them appropriately. Secondly, I find customers have some effective security tools, but they have limited security-skilled resources to, quote, watch the wire, watch the network posture. Now, what I mean by this is currently there's almost 300,000 unfilled security positions in the U.S. alone, over 1 million unfilled security positions globally. So that's a real challenge for our industry, because as the bad guys are hacking and doing more activity, leveraging these automated platforms, leveraging tools from the NSA and CIA that now anybody has access to, we don't have enough security experts that really know how to take a security product and do something meaningful with the data. There's some great products out there from many vendors that make firewall products and intrusion detection systems and SIM solutions and many others. But having the right resource, and I'm not talking about an IT guy who took the Security Plus exam, I'm talking about someone who has studied how hackers behave and how to counteract them. So when you're taking the Certified Ethical Hackers exam or someone who's gone through the CISSP training course, those guys are living the security experience and involved in cyber warfare on a daily basis. It's really important to have this kind of guys to drive these security tools to have the most impact and effect. We also see a lot of customers who overcompensate on one security domain over another. For instance, you may have a great identity and identity management solution, so you're authenticating users that come into your network, but have you focused enough on access management? In other words, once you're in the network, where can you go? You don't want all of your users having access to all of your subnets in your network or access to all of your systems on your network. And so access management is as important as identity management is. You may be great at having a perimeter security solution, but are you putting enough focus on a security intelligence solution? Something that consolidates information from all over the network and a holistic picture of your security posture. We're going to talk about that with Recon in just a few minutes. So these are some interesting aspects of challenges I've seen many of my customers over the years struggle with as they figure out, how do I protect my corporate network? So what do we do about all this? That's really what that leads us to, and I want to spend the remainder of the time talking about a solution that we're offering through Summit Partners that can help you with this security posture. So the solution is called Recon, and it's really just a managed service offering. It's an on-premise solution that provides correlation capabilities, and we use a virtual cloud-based security operations center to monitor your security posture as a customer. Let's go on mute if anybody's not on mute at the moment. Background noise. Thank you. So the way Recon solution works is very simple. Provision a virtual appliance on site at your location. You have multiple branch offices or multiple locations. This is a very scalable solution, and I'll talk about the architecture in a minute, but we can certainly handle a multi-site location. That virtual appliance is going to do a couple of things. First of all, we're going to collect information from your various security products that you have in your network. We'll collect information from servers of many different OS types. We'll collect information from firewalls and from intrusion detection systems. We pull all this data together, and we're analyzing that information, looking for signs of threat. I have connectivity to or plugins to over 300 different types of servers and firewalls and different security type appliances and devices. So we cover most everything people have, and if there's a need to create a connector to something that we don't have in our library, we can easily create that connector. But what we do next is when we find a threat, we forward that information over an encrypted link from your on-premise virtual appliance up to a cloud-based security operations center where I have staffed very advanced security engineers who do cybersecurity for a living, and they'll be watching those events and researching what exactly is happening with the events or alerts that come. We don't forward all events that happen into an environment, only alerts. Could you mute? I'm going to try to mute some people here, but I hear a lot of background noise. I can mute a few people. Yeah. So data and events, alerts only, up to a security operations center. We triage what's happening. We then provide a recommendation back to you and your IT team, your work staff, your firewall admin, whoever is appropriate, with instructions on here's what's happening and here's what we recommend you do to resolve it. That is not a firewall managed service. What I mean by that is we're not going to log into your firewall and modify a port for you. What we'll do is we'll tell you we see you're having a distributed denial of service attack happening right now. on a certain port on your firewall, and we recommend that you go shut off that port or redirect that traffic or do something else appropriate. So that's at a high level how the solution works. It is available in the U.S. today. We're working on solutions for Canada and South America. Unfortunately, because of data privacy laws in those countries, there's some complexity in doing that, so we will launch that in those countries here as soon as we can. Some of the benefits that I think are important to understand about the Recon solution are, number one, we are providing a lot of the expert researchers so that you don't have to. We talked earlier about there being almost 300,000 unfilled security positions in the U.S. alone, that companies who need a security person and just can't find one. We have those. So I've made a partnership with the Arizona Cyber Warfare Range. They're the lead cyber program in the country, according to Homeland Security. They're located in Phoenix, Arizona. And those guys have a significant amount of security staff. They test software solutions there for security capability. They provide free training. They're a nonprofit organization, so they provide free training to anyone who wants to learn offensive, defensive, and threat intelligence skills. You can go to azcwr.org, ArizonaCyberWarfareRange.org, in order to learn how you can participate in learning cybersecurity skills with Arizona Cyber Warfare Range. I hired the founder of that range onto my team, and he is leading my Recon Managed Service and our SOC organization. We've hired several different researchers out of the Cyber Warfare Range that have come onto our team as well in order to help us make sure that this solution is robust, staffed with really legit, qualified guys who've been in the business of cyber warfare for many, many years. So they've been a great partnership for us. We have the ability to leverage those resources on your behalf as part of this service. Other concepts here, we talk about a unified security management solution. What we mean by that, I'll show a couple of slides from now. But basically, we're unifying together several areas of security into one offering. We're providing aggregated security intelligence data as part of a SIM solution, or security intelligence and event management. We're doing vulnerability assessments real time. We're doing intrusion detection, and we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. We're doing asset discovery. We're unifying several different security concepts into one offering, and it's very cost effective. At the end, I'm going to show a tiering matrix to show you how the solution is priced on a tiered scale, but it's a very competitive solution in the market, probably has a lot of tools you've looked at. We talk about next-gen tools. One of the interesting things we've done, in addition to this virtual appliance we place on site to collect data, we have a second virtual appliance that we use upon request that can do some additional activities, like leveraging tools that can set up a honeypot in your environment if you are concerned about a breach or bad guys being on your network. We can set up a honeypot and make it simple and obvious for a bad guy, if he's on your network, to be attracted to that honeypot, and we can identify how much threat is going on inside your infrastructure. So we've got some forensic tools that we can leverage if we find issues on this second virtual appliance. So a set of next-gen tools that we've put together using my security analysts that I think are really innovative. So another area of real interest here is compliance reporting. A lot of our customers have the need to report on their security posture for compliance purposes. And part of what our platform does is allows you to actually see compliance reports, make sure that you have been vulnerability scanned on a regular basis, make sure that analyzing your network and reporting on what we're finding there for audit and compliance purposes, whether that's through HIPAA or PI or many of the other compliance regulations. So we'd love to talk to you more about the details of that. The solution works is pretty straightforward at a very high level. Assessing the network, that involves discovering what's on the network first. We're scanning the network on a regular basis using watching span ports, looking for traffic, and signs of command and control activity. When malware is planted on a network or on an endpoint device, typically we see malware trying to communicate back to an external server we call a command and control center server. Oftentimes that server is overseas, it's international, and when malware first shows up, it'll communicate with this command and control in order to get maybe an updated version of itself, or possibly to reach out and find out what the next instruction is, what should it do next. Maybe it's reporting information that it's finding on that server if it's trying to steal data. So it's important to watch for signs of command and control communications. That's one thing that we do. As we're finding these threats, we want to respond to those incidents. So the system will aggregate threats up as alerts up to our Security Operations Center, and our researchers will research what's going on. We'll compare the information with known threats that are in some of the threat feeds in the wild. For instance, we take advantage quite a bit with the Open Threat Exchange. It's a global threat feed that's active, current, up-to-date perspective on what's happening around the globe. For instance, when WannaCry was released, we saw that the moment WannaCry started spreading across the globe. We even it's a tool breach that happened a few months ago. It was my team that went in and put in all the CVEs, the indications of compromise, into the Open Threat Exchange so that others could take advantage of that and be able to isolate and identify those tools being used in the wild. So we're big in using threat feeds. Not only do we use the Open Threat Exchange, we use several others from a few vendors, plus we have an FBI threat feed that we leverage as well. So that's an important part of the equation, assisting the network, finding the threat, responding to that threat, working with you as the end customer to figure out what do you do in response. Here's the set of activities we recommend that you execute to resolve the issue. In addition, if you do have a compromise, if, for instance, let's say you do get some ransomware infected, or you have had data stolen and you identify and uncover that, for incident response services, which is what you do in response to an incident, right? We do have access to some third-party incident response companies. Incident response is a whole category of security, very separate from monitoring services typically. We have the ability to pull in some incident response services that can drop in kind of parachute style and help you recover from incidents. Those services are generally hourly based. We have several vendors like Cisco and others who have global incident response teams that we partner with. Most attacks do have a global perspective, as the data is traced back many times to other countries, and so it takes a global capability there to really be effective sometimes. So if you need digital forensics to find the malware and identify the malware, or to do a dark web search to figure out is your data showing up and being actively bought and sold on the dark web, those are all after-action kind of incident response services. So while we don't provide this directly, we would help you pull in the right incident response should you need those in an emergency situation. We talked earlier about the capabilities or components of Recon. Let me touch on these just one level deeper. We talked about asset discovery as being a first step. It's important to know what assets are on the network, servers, switches, routers, firewalls, et cetera, that we need to monitor. We'll connect to those with plugins or connectors and pull information. That's what a SIEM solution does, security information and event management. Information off those devices into a log server. So we analyze that information looking for correlation patterns. If I see the same user ID logged in both from the U.S. and from Europe, roughly the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem, but it's certainly an indicator there could be something bad going on there. Maybe someone's credentials were compromised. So a SIEM solution plays a huge in tracking threat and correlating information. We have a behavioral monitoring capability. For instance, we can monitor the net flows in the network and look for signs of breach or signs of activity that looks suspicious. We can monitor services on servers or file integrity monitoring, which is more intrusion detection, but we're looking for behaviors on the network and on individual servers that look like the behavior of something that is bad. Now, we're not a full endpoint security agent. The expectation is you would have an endpoint security product like McAfee or Trend Micro or many of the different endpoint products on the market. We can plug into those and interface with them and work with them using automation as necessary. But we do certainly have the ability to monitor agentlessly change in behavior on servers in terms of ports that open and close and files that change. Intrusion detection comes in a flavor of host-based intrusion detection or network intrusion detection. With host-based, we're actually we have a little agent we can put on the host that does some level of endpoint security, but it's not a full antivirus solution. But we are identifying files that change on the endpoint device, services that change, and various activities that indicate maybe something, malware is present, communicating with a command and control center. We had a scenario just a couple of weeks ago with one of our current customers where they noticed network signs that a piece of malware on an endpoint device was communicating with a command and control center overseas. And so we notified the customer immediately that we believe that there's malware on the endpoint device. Turns out that particular customer didn't have any endpoint security deployed in their environment, so we couldn't tell them exactly what malware variant was there, and we couldn't clean it. So that led to the customer a discussion, and they realized that they really needed to deploy an endpoint security solution, right? But we at least caught the malware because we were watching the network traffic and signs that it existed there. Vulnerability assessments are important capability of the solution. So we're leveraging external known vulnerability databases and scanning the network and the servers on the network, looking for active signs of vulnerability. For instance, it turns out 80+% of hacks happen by leveraging or exploiting known vulnerabilities. That means that customers oftentimes don't patch often or thoroughly enough their infrastructure. So that's what vulnerability assessments are all about. How do we make sure that you have as much of your patch up to date so that the known vulnerabilities are at least accounted for, because that's where the bad guys come in quite often. You can pay to have vulnerability assessments or penetration tests, which are different, but you can pay to have those done on a semi-annual, annual basis. Recon is going to constantly be doing vulnerability scanning of your environment, looking for the vulnerabilities, and we'll notify you when we see things that you need to take advantage of and fix. From architecture perspective, I'll just share quickly that it is scalable. I talked earlier at the beginning about the fact that if you're a multi-site environment, we can handle that type of architecture. The reason is because the way our virtual appliance works on site is we have three components to it. There's a log server where we collect information from your switches and routers and servers and firewalls, et cetera, and we put it in a log server where we can look for correlations and identify points of compromise. Sensors that deploy out to collect the information, and we have a core server that has all the automation processes and executes the vulnerability scanning and manages the infrastructure. Those three components are generally for a relatively small environment in one virtual appliance, but the three components can be separated out and deployed and duplicated as necessary for a larger environment. For instance, if you happen to have 3 branch offices, as an example, we could put a sensor in each of your 3 branch offices that all forward information back to a server and logger at a central location. We'll aggregate the data and then report on it, and only alerts get forwarded up to our Security Operations Center to notify our staff, who will then use an encrypted channel to log into your appliance and do their research. My point being, your data doesn't leave your premise. The only thing that would leave is an alert that has some summarized information about one event, not all the event data, and certainly not all the collected data from your environment. It stays on-premise securely in a secure appliance on your network. That's a little bit about the architecture. From a pricing perspective, to understand the way we have structured the tier, we have 4 tiers of service. Tiers are delineated primarily by what we call events per second. Event per second is the number of events that come out of a device each second. For instance, a server might send an average of events per second out of the server to something like Collected. Firewall might send 50 events per second. Intrusion detection system might send 35 or 40 events per second. So what we do is we have a little spreadsheet calculator, and we review you and find out how much infrastructure you have, switches, routers, firewalls, servers, etc. And we calculate up how many average events per second we'll be monitoring for your environment, and that drops you into one of these tiers of service. Other things that differentiate these tiers are maybe how many host-based agents we might install as part of the offering. We add additional host agents onto the price separately onto any of these tiers. So there's a lot of variability. We can customize these a little bit, but as a general rule, there's 4 tiers of service. We're selling these in annual contracts. You can also get a little bit of a discount for 24-month or 36-month contracts. It is a monthly recurring revenue service, so you're paying on a monthly basis, which makes it attractive to a lot of customers who spread that cost out. When you think about hiring just one security person to monitor and manage your security environment, a year of this service is significantly less than hiring just one full-time person to do this for you. And I've invested in a whole team of people in a SOC that you can leverage that are experts that are an extension of your team. So it's a very cost-attractive solution. We would love, Summit Partners would love the opportunity to talk to you guys more about this and how that pricing works. Winding down, let me just show you a quick example of a success story that we have. Many of you know Cashman Equipment, cat dealer, came to us with a need to monitor the security of their network. The goal for them was to make sure that someone is watching the wire 24 hours a day, trying to find a bad guy before he does something bad. We talked earlier about a bad guy being in your network an average of 140 days before you ever find him or know that he's there because he launches an attack. Cashman really had the desire to watch their security posture on a more regular basis and to be notified when something happens. We've had many successes with Cashman as this example. For instance, we have identified some variants of malware that have been in their environment. There's been a couple of things that were very interesting that turned out to be false positives, but there were signs of threat that could absolutely have been a rat, a remote access agent that's monitoring their network. With the research for them, and we all agreed that it turned out to be an employee who had installed something that wasn't authorized and was performing like it could be a piece of malware, but we tracked that down for them and identified that. We've found several different scenarios over time that have been interesting to Cashman and they needed research on to be able to resolve some security issues. So we're really thrilled with how our success has been with Cashman Equipment, and they're paying a monthly service in an annual contract. So we're really excited about how that's gone. Some of the questions that Cashman asked me early in the sales cycle with them, and I thought I would throw some example questions up from Cashman and other customers that are common that I receive. You might be having some of the same questions. Number one, are we a monitoring service? Are we a firewall service? Or are we an incident response? And as I've mentioned previously, we're a security monitoring service, right, with remediation recommendation. What I mean by that is we're going to help you understand how to remediate the issues. We'll give you guidance and instruction and walk through that with you, but we're not necessarily touching your firewall and doing the remediation ourselves. Where's our SOC located? I get that question all the time. A lot of the modern security operations centers are virtual in nature, so we can take advantage of experts around the country, and ours is as well. We have some resources in Phoenix and some in Chicago and some in some other places, but we have a virtual security operations center. How qualified are our SOC analysts? I talked about the Arizona Cyber Warfare Range earlier, where we are attracting talent that's been through years of study and practice out at the range and brought them onto our team. We're looking at people with CISSP certifications, certified ethical hacking certifications, et cetera. When infrastructure is breached, how will you help? I talked earlier about the ability to pull in some external companies to provide incident response services, and they are typically an hourly service. But a great example is if you have a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service attack happening in real time, within 4 hours we can help you spin up a DDoS mitigation service, such as an example would be F5's Silverline cloud solution. It's really effective. So we're there to make sure that you have access to the tools you need in order to resolve issues as they come up. So final topic, and I'll open it up for questions here in a minute. I want to bring up another quick concept, and it's around security assessments. Because some of you are probably wondering, how secure is my environment? How prepared am I for some of the attacks we've talked about today? So Summit Partners has access to some assessment capability that can help you determine that. And some of these assessments have a cost, and some of them are free. They're complimentary. These happen to be on this slide, the complimentary assessments. But it's obviously the ones that are paid, or when we have to send expensive people on site with expensive tools to do expensive scanning and time-consuming scanning. Some of those have a bit of a cost to them. But the idea here is to help you understand exactly where your security posture is. So we have security posture assessment. Similarly, if you're in the healthcare or retail industry or vertical, we have a specific security posture assessment for you that speaks in your language and analyzes things from the perspective of HIPAA or PCI. So these are free assessments, and we come in, we interview you. These are more business type assessments, understanding the resources you have, the tools you're using, the network situation that you have, and we'll make recommendations on maybe where should you consider investing or shoring up your security posture. We'll have some paid assessments available if you need a pen test. Many companies try to do pen testing once a year, every 6 months. We do have the ability to help perform those for you if you need that assistance. So then try to penetrate your network, either an internal pen test where we have access to your network resources and we're kind of banging on them with us, or a black box pen test where we don't have much access at all from you and we just come in and see what we can penetrate on our own. We can do that too. So there's options there if that's of interest and something you need. Your Summit Partners sales rep can certainly get you more information about how these security assessments can help. And lastly, I'll just wrap up by making a couple of thoughts and comments. First of all, you can run the intrusion automation with your automation. There's a lot, these tools that we talked about at the beginning of the call are out there, auto-scanning the networks, looking for vulnerabilities, many of which are 0 days that you don't even know about, and therefore there are no patches. So the bad guys can get in, and automation is really difficult to fight because they're not necessarily targeting you as an individual. You're going to get wrapped up in just an automated scan and someone spending time focused on you just because their scanning tool identified you as a potential target. I also want to remind you ransomware is growing. It's a profit center for the underworld, and it will continue to be this year. It's important that we find the bad guys on our networks before they have time to set up their attacks. That's what Recon is all about. Let's watch the network, let's identify where the threat is, and help you mitigate very quickly. So reach out to your Summit Partner reps for additional information. We can offer you more data about Recon as well as information about assessments, and we'd love to do that for you. So what we'll do as we're wrapping up is I'm going to unmute several of the phones here. Head up for questions. If anyone has a question, I'd be happy to answer in our last few minutes. Any questions there? That's today. I'd like to say a few words as we wrap up. And if there are questions that come in, feel free to reach out to your Summit Partner rep.
Yeah, thanks everybody for attending. As Alex mentioned at the beginning, we did record this, so if any of your colleagues mention this to them and they'd like to get more information, this will be available on our Summit Partners YouTube channel, so that way you can share it with them or watch it again if you want to see any particular parts that you might want to get a refresher on, that sort of thing. And as always, we'll make sure that you guys have our contact information, so if you do want to get more information and learn more about it, we'd be more than happy to share with you. And I did mention that the guys at Cashman are very excited about their Recon implementation, and they've made it very clear that if anybody has any desire to speak with them about their implementation of Recon, they can make themselves available. So that's something we can, if you guys don't have their contact information, it's something we can broker as well. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.